Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another episode of Little Modular. I'm a bit sick, but I'll try to do my best. Today we have two new modules. These are prototypes from JORANALOGUE, Enhance 2 and Orbit 3. I will focus on the Orbit 3 today. Just to be clear, this episode is sponsored by JORANALOGUE. They have sent me those prototypes in return for a review, but they have no influence on what I'm saying. What is Orbit 3? It says here it's a double scroll chaos oscillator. And as daunting and confusing it may sound, it's not that difficult. It's just a chaos source for your modulations, and it can also act as an audio source, an exotic and odd audio or modulation source. So as the name implies, orbit, it is based on orbiting particle. That's what it says in the manual. You can imagine a particle in a 3D space which is orbiting around two equilibrium points, all right? And you can influence how this particle is orbiting those two equilibrium points. You can also influence the equilibrium points themselves by the means of a modulation or the parameters located on the front panel. There are some visuals of this process in 2D that I have taken from the manual, and you can see them right now on the screen if you wish to picture it yourself. So let's start with the front panel, how it works. First of all, here you have a switch which allows you to operate in the audio range, in the upper position, or in the lower modulation range, just like an LFO. Below you also have a switch which is labeled tame and wild. In the tame position, the modulations, the orbits are more symmetrical, they behave more statically. And then you have the wild switch, which changes the nature of the oscillation, which is more abrupt, more aggressive and asymmetrical. Then starting from the top, we have the frequency. And although you might think this is a chaotic module, and chaos noise does not benefit from frequency, right? Well, it does in this instance, because it is a chaotic module, but you have influence over the chaos, because there's always a certain frequency lying below the chaos clouds that can be produced with this thing. So the speed of this orbiting of this chaos is determined with this knob. Then on the right side we have the distribution. This influences the internal feedback path, which in turns influences how the orbits are distributed. The more you turn it clockwise, the closer the orbits tend to be to the equilibrium points, which just simply means you are changing the nature of the whole modulation of the whole orbits with this. So this is for how fast, and this is what shape the orbits will take. Those two also work in tandem with the equilibrium points. Each of those knobs just moves the equilibrium points from their original state, 0 volts, further away from it. Okay, the more you twist it clockwise. Then we also have two knobs dedicated for controlling the modulation, which can be applied to both the frequency and the distribution knobs. You have the inputs for the external modulation right here. Okay, so frequency and distribution, and then we have attenuverters for both of the inputs with 0 at the none position. Then we also have 3 outputs of 3-dimensional orbits, which is X, Y, and Z. And for convenience, you also have inverted versions of those below, so inverted X, Y, and Z. There is also modulation for each of the equilibrium points knobs, right here on the left and on the right. And we also have a reset, which works pretty much like a hard reset on a typical oscillator. This, at any given time, this represents an equilibrium point which is being currently orbited, which results in a pseudo-random gate generator. So it's going to be plus 5 volts for the positive scroll and 0 volts for the negative scroll. And you can use that, for instance, in conjunction with the reset to turn this into a more of a stable oscillator unit, which I will show you later on. You also have a calibration trim right here, so you can calibrate, recalibrate this unit. It should work just fine without any manipulations, but if you would like to recalibrate it, you could do that by inserting a tiny screwdriver here and adjusting it. But to do so, I strongly recommend that you refer to the manual. Yeah, let's just hear it, okay? I can just stick it to any of the outputs. And as I mentioned, here you have the frequency. We are now in the audio range. Here is the distribution. And here we can change the equilibrium points. Let's see how it sounds in the wild mode. It reminds me of, you know, of the old school internet connections. You know, in the 90s, if you want to connect to the internet, you would need to dial up a number through a phone, and the sounds you encountered were really similar to these sounds. And also, as we talk retro, in the 80s, if you want to load a video game on a personal computer like a Commodore 64 or Atari, the sounds were also similar. So if you are craving for some sentimental sounds, yep, that's it. All right. Of course, we can go to the modulation speeds. And in the modulation range, it has a 7 minutes range. In the audio range, it's 22 Hertz to 22,000 Hertz, so 22 kilohertz. Pretty wide range. All right, so let's start with some tweaking, and let's see where it leads us to. Let's start with the audio range. Where I find this module to be particularly useful in the audio range is the percussive department. So what I have here is a simple patch. I'm connecting the output from any of the outs to a VCA, which is then fed by JORANALOGUE contour 1 down here. Okay, and if you put it to a short envelope, all this noise will make up for tons of different hi-hatish percussive sounds, and as you can hear, these are really interesting. Of course, the envelope itself changes also a lot. Okay, lots of different spiky metallic sounds. Really punchy also. So as you can hear, plenty of sounds to be found here, even in the lower register. Okay, you can try also some feedback patching. Like you can connect one of the outs to, let's say, frequency, and adjust demodulation. Let's see what happens, what that does. Okay, we can use some more chords and see what will happen. Let's use this out and let's connect it to the distribution in right here. Ooh, what's that? Okay, so as you can see, as far as percussion goes, metallic stuff, this one is really nice. It reminds me kind of the Interstellar Radio by Schlappy Engineering in this regard. It could also be a noisy source of metallic percussion. But percussion is just the beginning. Let's take out all of the feedback modulation from it, and let's apply a different feedback modulation, because we have the EP, the equilibrium point out. If you connect this output to a reset in right here, you can get of a stable, actually more of a stable oscillation, as you can hear. And if we make the envelope longer, you can create some steady tones, and you can modulate these tones with a pitch CV, for instance. If we connect a CV source to frequency in, we get the standard oscillator. And by turning the equilibrium points, we can change the timbre. You have to wiggle a bit to find some interesting stable points, as it is a chaotic oscillator, but it is possible to find some stable oscillation. It works best with the tame switch in the tame position. It's more stable then. Okay. Really nice bell-like tones. Super clear. Oh, I like this one a lot. Okay. So here is the modulation patch I came up with. Of course, all of these 6 outs can be used simultaneously, and it kind of reminds me of the Octasource by Erika Synths. So we have those 6 outs that you can, tap into, and they are in different positions of the particle moving around. So we can, modulate parameters simultaneously with this quasi-chaotic yet to some degree stable modulations. So it might be fun. I decided to go with the Phonogene, old trusty Phonogene. Up here you can see just partially, I guess, not the whole module, and it's kind of freaky.
JORANALOGUE. JORANALOGUE.
And as you can hear,
JORANALOGUE.
at some point there is this reverb firing up, and I use the EP output right here, equilibrium points out. So whenever the particle changes the equilibrium point around which it is orbiting, it's firing a gate. So I use that gate to operate a VCA, which in turns then activates the dry wet knob on my Tip Top Audio ZDSP module, loaded with some reverb. So we have this
JORANALOGUE.
interesting feature.
JORANALOGUE.
If we make it faster, the modulation is going to change faster.
JORANALOGUE. JORANALOGUE.
Let me adjust the
JORANALOGUE.
envelope, as you can hear,
JORANALOGUE.
really fast,
JORANALOGUE.
slower.
JORANALOGUE. JORANALOGUE. JORANALOGUE.
Okay?
JORANALOGUE.
And of course, I have
JORANALOGUE.
connected those outputs to
JORANALOGUE.
the phonogene.
JORANALOGUE.
So if I now
JORANALOGUE.
set the depth of the modulation
JORANALOGUE.
to some different
JORANALOGUE.
depth,
JORANALOGUE.
okay, and then adjust the depth, let's try it in the audio range maybe even. Ooh. That's interesting. Oh my god. Let's not forget about the wild switch. Okay, maybe the pitch wasn't the best idea, but let's see how this one works. And we still get this, you know, reverb bursts. Okay. So if we connect multi-outs from here, we can get this really radical changes. Okay. Let's not forget that we can still, you know, modulate some of the parameters to get yet more interesting sounds. You can hear the orbits right now really clearly, actually. Oh man, this is a really cool sound. Now, you might recall from my previous reviews the Morph 4 by the same company, JORANALOGUE, which is a quad VCA modulation matrix thing. Really interesting module and a unique one. So what I did here, I have connected most of the outs from orbit 3 to the ins on the Morph 4. I have adjusted the position, you know, level, span for different ins. And what this allows me to do is to morph between those incoming levels and overlap them with the span, for instance, which allows me for some more drastic and interesting changes, like so. Check it out. It's just a DPO through an IntelliGel Korgazmatron. See? I can even, let's open up the filter even more. So different levels, different span. Okay, different speed on the orbit. Yeah. I can even modulate this, you know, movement with another output from the orbit. So it just speaks by itself. Okay. Many interesting sounds. Okay, like so. So combining those two modules, you can get this modulation hub which is chaotic, but at the same point tamed and evolving. So it's the best of both worlds. I guess that would be it for the Orbit 3. Stay tuned for the Enhanced 2, useful module also for your stereo duties. I'll be back with it soon. If you like that video, please like, please subscribe, and yeah, stay healthy. Bye bye, take care.